Good afternoon and welcome to What's in It for Africa. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Would you speak about energy?
Definitely.
What about economics?
Yes, for sure.
What about climate change?
Definitely.
Yes, but what's in it for Africa?
Well, you'll find out.
Hello and welcome to What's in It for Africa, the EU-Africa update show with me, Uzo Mudu. On the show this month, we're going to be speaking about the EU's anti-tax avoidance package, also the conflict minerals legislation, and the EU-Tunisia Free Trade Agreement, as well as the UK-EU deal to avoid Brexit. Also, a new feature on the show is that we will be speaking to Tarila Ebiede from the European Centre for Development Policy Management about what's coming up in March. So let's get started. The EU's anti-tax avoidance package lays out plans for improved tax governance with non-EU countries, for example through special clauses in trade agreements and assistance to developing countries on tax matters. Now, the Commission wants a common EU system for assessing, screening and listing third countries on tax governance measures. However, the package does not include or address actions to be taken against those listed countries. The package also includes legally binding rules on exit taxation. Now, this is where a taxpayer transfers assets out of one member state to another member state or a third country. There are also rules more generally on anti-abuse measures, which allows for tax authorities to ignore private arrangements where the purpose is actually to get a tax advantage that defeats the object or the purpose of the tax provisions already in place. Also, there are rules included in the package on the taxation of capital gains and dividends in respect of companies in low-tax third countries. And the African interests. Well, Macky Sall, the Senegalese president, back in November, did say that African leaders would not need handouts if they were able to collect the 16 billion euros lost through tax avoidance by multinational companies. And it's important to remember that a significant number of multinational companies are based within the European Union and therefore will be subject to these new rules. Also, Kenya just signed a global deal in February to crack down on multinational companies evading taxes. However, it's not to be forgotten that domestic tax governance is also problematic in many countries on the continent. We know that at least the largest tax collectors on the continent, Algeria, Angola, Nigeria and South Africa, actually account for a massive 68% of the continent's total tax effort. The EU package will now be put to the Council and the European Parliament for further consideration and will take on average between 18 and 24 months to complete. Although with such a controversial package, we may be in for a much longer wait. The Commission, the Council and the European Parliament, the three main institutions of the European Union, have been negotiating to find a compromise on the conflict minerals legislation, which was proposed back in March 2014. The heart of the current negotiation lies in the gap between the positions of the Council and the European Parliament, both co-legislators on this file. The European Parliament wants to see a mandatory approach. Actually wants to see binding regulation that applies not only to the raw materials, tin, tantalum, tungsten and gold, but also to the finished products, things like washing machines, mobile phones and tablets. This would mean monitoring requirements would be established along the whole supply chain, so as to verify that the minerals have not been used to fund conflicts, a common practice in places like the Great Lakes region. Whereas member states in the Council broadly support a non-binding opt-in system, and the Commission, who proposed the legislation, recommends the implementation of a compulsory system on just one part of the supply chain, those directly importing the minerals. This piece of legislation is a priority and the negotiations are set to conclude by the end of June. However, considering the divergent views between the Council and the European Parliament, we might be looking at the end of the year. The European Parliament gave its opinion on opening negotiations on an EU-Tunisia Free Trade Agreement. Now, negotiations had already informally started back in October, and the agreement will include a wealth of measures, including those to facilitate trade, from the simplification and standardisation of rules on food safety to the liberalising trade in services. In the view of the European Parliament, this trade agreement should go beyond strict trade rules and should seek to contribute to the stability of Tunisia in terms of democracy and boosting its economy. Now, in the same week, members of the European Parliament backed emergency plans to allow an additional 70,000 tonnes of Tunisian virgin olive oil to be imported duty-free into the EU during 2016 and 2017. The first full round of the EU-Tunisia Free Trade Agreement negotiations are actually due to start in the week commencing the 18th of April in Tunis. In February, the UK and EU reached a deal, one that could possibly avoid Brexit. The deal gives the UK power to limit some EU migrant benefits, specifically in-work benefits and child benefits under certain circumstances. It also gives the UK the ability to enact an emergency safeguard to protect the City of London. It also includes a treaty change so that the UK is not bound for an ever closer union with other EU member states, with the intention that the UK will not be forced into political integration. Now, this is a critical juncture in the Brexit discussion, one that has been a hot topic in Brussels, particularly following the UK elections last year, which was largely fought on this very issue. And why should African countries be concerned about Brexit? Well, pro-Brexit campaigners representing African interests have argued that by leaving the EU, the UK would be able to better concentrate and increase its trade relations with its Commonwealth partners. 19 out of the 53 Commonwealth countries are actually on the African continent. Also, Callistus Juma, Professor of International Development at Harvard University, recently mounted criticism that EU policies in the agricultural sector in particular have caused tariff escalation, restrictions on technological innovation and food export preferences, which affect Africa's ability to address its agricultural and food challenges. For those African countries with particularly strong ties with the UK, it might then result in a more favourable regulatory environment for agricultural trade relations. However, a softer political issue to consider is that the UK has been a leading advocate for EU-Africa trade relations within the EU, particularly trade relations with Anglophone African countries. So, without this voice within the EU, can we be reassured that these political and trade relations will continue to remain high on the EU radar? The referendum will take place on the 23rd of June. Now, let's hear from Tarila about what's coming up in March.
Hi, my name is Tarila Ebiede. I am Nigerian and I work for the European Centre for Development Policy Management. I'm here to bring you the latest news of what's happening next month. Did you know that Europe is home to more than 1,200 seaports? However, about 95% of all flights and passengers use only 319 of those. The problem is that not all of these key ports are offering the same services nor are equally attractive for investors. This is why on 7 March, the European Parliament will adopt a regulation on market access and financial transparency of ports. With it, the Parliament hopes to end tons of paperwork needed for custom clearance, which results in delay. Delays, they say, makes European ports not competitive. Later on this month, a special post-COP21 ACP meeting will take place in Brussels. There are lots of issues to be discussed after the Paris Agreement on climate change. And in this meeting, the ACP group will discuss what is needed to be done to make the agreement a reality in their countries. Do you want to know what's happening this April? Don't forget to watch What's in It for Africa.
Thank you for watching the EU Africa Update show this month, and remember you can start subscribing to our monthly mailing list where you can get all the updates directly to your inbox with plenty more links and additional updates not included in the show. Please see the video description for more information or visit our website to subscribe. And only 2 more weeks for your next dose of EU Africa current affairs with the Inside the Issue show. Remember, until then, subscribe to our YouTube page, follow us on Twitter and like our Facebook page. My name is Uzo Madu for What's in It for Africa.